The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome, Master Listeners, to tonight's Pay It Forward Mercury Retrograde in Leo Cancer webinar. This is Media Monk, and I'm joined by Kim Marie shortly. I'll turn the call over to her. Just wanted to acknowledge all of our newer people to these webinars. I hope everybody got in real good. And just to remind you, if you're one of those that did not get in on the live event, you're going to be looking for a follow-up email from the same webinar service about 24 to 48 hours after the event. It will contain a PDF, and all of the active links to the webinar, audio files, and all the slides for printout will be in that follow-up email. So tune into that as an added value from Evolutionary Astrology Network. We're going to cover a lot of material here in a short time, so I'll turn it over to Star Lady on the podcast, but better known as Kim Marie, the Managing Director for EAN.
Thank you, Media Monk, aka Leroy, Lee, Roy. He's had a multitude of names over his life. Welcome, everyone, to our Mercury retrograde. As you can see on your screen, Mercury is going to go retrograde July 7th through the 31st from about 4.5 degrees Leo back to 24 degrees Cancer. And so this is a Mercury retrograde that's almost split between the two signs. Let's see. Oh, there we go. First of all, a couple housekeeping slides. Here at EAN, you can study with us 3 different ways. You can listen to our free weekly audio podcasts on what's happening in the stars. You can subscribe to our Astro Library, and of course we have our Evolutionary Astrology course, which is comprised of 3 different segments. You can see them on your screen in front of you right there. However, our summer special is our Astro Library. The 3 different sections that you see on your screen are half price through July 31st, and there's a link at the bottom of your screen that'll take you directly there when you get the PDF after this webinar, as Leroy talked about. So to get 50% off, you want to use the coupon code upon checkout, and the word Cancer will give you half price. And of course, go back one screen here, you can subscribe to the Astro Library 1, 6, or 12 months, or you can do a monthly recurring that you then can cancel at any time. And all of those variables are still the 50% off.
Yeah, Kim, can I just add something to that before you keep going? You can also go in, and if you decide want to dip your toe in the water, you're not sure about the product, we've got a lot of information in there, hundreds and hundreds of hours in each of these sections. But if you get one and you like it for whatever the number is per month, you can also reuse that Cancer coupon code an additional time. So you can go ahead and get archetypes, planets, houses, and signs. If you like what you see, come back before July 31st. That coupon code will be in effect for understanding the A method or the relationship segment with all the other content that we've produced over the years. So 2 uses on that Cancer coupon code per person, okay?
Okay. All right, so here are our dates of Mercury's retrograde from conjunction to conjunction. The exterior conjunctions are when Mercury is moving forward on the far side of the sun. We've had Mercury pre-shadow. Here's the retrograde date. And of course, here's the interior conjunction to the sun. That's when Mercury is between Earth and Sun. Anytime a planet is retrograde, regardless of the planet, that's when it is closest to Earth. That is when that planet is between the sun and the Earth. We'll show this slide again a couple more times. Here's the dates that Mercury is in Cancer and then Mercury in Leo. And as you can see on your screen, we have Mercury in Cancer for a total of 45 days. We have Mercury in Leo for a total of 41 days. As it goes into the next sign, dips back, and then goes back again. So here's Mercury stationary retrograde, the event chart for that. I always like to use 0° Aries rising for a house system when I teach a lot of classes, because it allows us to see the natural zodiac and it makes it relevant no matter where you are on planet Earth. You can see on your screen there that we have Saturn just getting ready to make its second of 3 conjunctions to the South Node. So this is very active. That Cancer Capricorn axis is emphasized during this retrograde. So inner security, Cancer; outer security, Capricorn; family, career, community, corporations. All of that is very, very activated for us. And as a matter of fact, in addition to that, this is going to be a solar lunar review. Our personality in every way is going to be going through the thought process of, what do I not like about myself? What do I want to change about myself? How are my emotions becoming involved? Where do I need to emotionally mature that allows my sense of self to evolve? And of course, the distortions are all of those words we hear with Cancer and Leo: immaturity, selfishness, pettiness. Make up your own words. You probably are knowing this if you study astrology in any degree. All of this can be triggered as well for us. And so we also, though, have a creativity review as the emotions come bubbling up to the surface, and its intent is to realign our creativity with what our natural abilities are. And so even though the signs are Cancer, Capricorn with an emphasis, Leo Aquarius comes in as well. And so it brings in that career and creativity and all of it mixed together, and something's changing. Maybe we want to quit a job and start a new one. Maybe the role in our work is changing. Maybe we want to start our own business. There's things that are just coming up to the surface all over the place with our sense of self and how we want to express and create out there in the world. We will also have tug of wars between our love interests and family. I don't want to have to take care of my parents. I want to go find a new relationship. And we are having to balance that between this Leo Cancer retrograde cycle and change our thought processes around it. It's not an either or. How do we balance it? And of course, the polarity of Cancer is Capricorn, self-responsibility. The polarity of Mercury retrograde in Leo is Aquarius, which brings in that objectivity. So this is a Mercury retrograde cycle where our ability to understand a larger point of view beyond our own attachments to any issue or situation is important. How can I step back and look at everything that's triggering me emotionally? How can I step back and look at everything that frustrates me in regards to creativity and career? How can I see it from the larger picture, and what is my role in it? More on this later. I just wanted to give you a little sense of overview. But the other thing that we've got going on through this Mercury retrograde cycle is the North Node solar eclipse season. And what are eclipses? The sun, the moon, and the earth all lining up together. And here's a retrograde cycle of Mercury in the signs ruled by the sun, Leo, and moon, Cancer. And so while you'll see later on this Mercury retrograde doesn't have a lot of aspects to it, it's going to feel just as intense because of these eclipses that are taking place. So that solar lunar review, everything that's been stirred up beneath the surface comes bubbling out during eclipses. And during a solar eclipse, the sun is what's eclipsed, the moon's covering the sun. And so that sense of self and identity just gets eclipsed. That ability to express, create, move forward, be ourselves, give and receive love. All of that stuff gets eclipsed. And so we have to make more effort to understand exactly what it is we are wanting to do with our world. And you see, during a North Node eclipse season, what that means is Moon goes around and touches South Node, North Node every 2 weeks. The Sun only touches the North Node once a year, touches the South Node once a year, and that's how we name the eclipses. And so when the Sun's on the North Node, in Cancer this case, this is the North Node eclipses. This is about moving forward towards that North Node. It is about emotionally maturing, healing where we feel emotionally wounded. Now, with this solar eclipse, which is going to happen just before Mercury turns retrograde, July 7th, again, I said it's going to be the second of 3 Saturn conjunctions to the South Node, is not all bad. If we've been making prior efforts with the Capricorn words, the Saturnian words, self-responsibility, self-discipline, being mature, looking at what our roles are in our family, in work, in society, if we've been making an effort to be responsible social person in our world, we can have the rewards or the fruition of our efforts. However, if we've been ignoring things, if we've not wanted to be responsible, we've wanted to push it off onto somebody else and it's their fault and it's their work, it's not me, we can also find that this eclipse and this whole week leading up to Mercury retrograde might bring what astrology calls that karmic retribution, paying the Pied Piper, forcing us to be responsible in some way or to make amends for something in some way. As we look at Saturn, balsamic Pluto, and the South Node, still within very tight conjunctions to both of them, all of us have been looking at our past in some way. We've been looking at work and career. We've been looking at all these issues we're going to talk about with this Mercury retrograde. How are you stepping up to the plate? How are you maturing? And if your outer world Capricorn is changing, this Mercury retrograde will intensify the emotional inner world and how you have to change your thoughts and feelings to then go forth and change your outer world. Now, briefly, I usually use Donald Trump. For those of you who are not familiar with this, I am not a fan of Donald Trump. Don't make any excuses for it. Getting really tired of this person. But his chart is so activated with this Mercury retrograde and these Cancer Capricorn planets and the Jupiter last quarter squares to Neptune. Jupiter is going across his own natal node and all these planets 3 times. Neptune is going to be squaring all of this 3 times, 5 times between 2019 and 2022. So what's happening here when we have the solar eclipse is his own natal Mercury in Cancer is going to get triggered. Family can be in the news here. Emotional things happening with family members or family members getting the paying the Pied Piper, having prior efforts come to exposure. Stay tuned. We will see how it all turns out in regards to everything. He's already had his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in the news trying to create a peace plan in Israel and Palestine. And if I'm remembering this correctly, they say they want a 2-state solution, but I don't think many people feel Some people feel that I'm not going about it fairly. Stay tuned. You can watch, headlines in the news if you're so inclined and see how it comes out. We also have the lunar eclipse taking place, and this is always the full moon. And this one's going to be about 24 degrees Capricorn. And as you can then see one more time, we've got those two polarities of the zodiac emphasized. Also on that lunar eclipse, Venus will make an exact opposition to Saturn that day at about 17 degrees Cancer Capricorn. And then on the 21st, and I'm trying to remember, I'll have another slide that something else is happening. But here's where Venus in Cancer is going to oppose both Saturn and Pluto. Yes, go over the North Node and oppose the South Node. So Venus will get involved in these eclipses and this Mercury retrograde cycle. And so what do we value will be emphasized as well during this Mercury retrograde cycle. And so personally, collectively, with this Cancer Capricorn, so much of it is all going to come down to those evolutionary astrology terms of inclusiveness versus exclusiveness. Take your issue. All you have to do is look around you, and everywhere, immigration, gender rights, Cancer, Capricorn, money and banking, the political world, healthcare, every issue you can think of, it boils down to include or exclude. And this is what Venus is going to expose and prod us with during this retrograde cycle. And so if we are fear-based, Mercury and Venus retrograde in Cancer will make us exclude. If we are reaching for deepening emotional self-reliance, then we will open up and realize that inner security allows us to be okay regardless of changing in the world, our world personally, collectively, then we will be more inclusively based. So there's a real strong battle for that going on. I got another slide I'm going to show you a little later that I've been waiting for the last 2-3 years. Here's Donald Trump's chart again with the lunar eclipse on July 16th. The following day, Robert Mueller's going to testify for 2 House committees on his report with the interference of Russia in the election, and any collusion with the Trump administration and or any obstruction by the Trump administration. That might be a little highlighted. As you can see, that lunar eclipse at 24 degrees is going to be extremely tight to Trump's Saturn and his Venus. And you can see how the Capricorn planets are marching towards opposition to those Cancer planets. And so a lot of emotional sensitivity going on. We can expect him to be quite emotional around this. He was born on a lunar eclipse. Trump is sensitized by any lunar eclipse that comes along. Personally, in his house, having this be the 5th and 11th houses, it's me versus you. Intent of objectivity may or may not happen. I don't see it. To me, I see more emotional immaturity and acting out. And we'll see what Mars does on his natal Pluto. Again, I just say stay tuned. I have come to sense that I think there's a lot of people kind of saying enough is enough. I don't think I want another 4 years of this person. And so that anybody but Trump, they may not be out there in the headlines, but I do think there's a broad consensus switch happening here. Not with the loyal diehards. I'm talking those in the middle. So I'm going to go over a few of these slides very quickly. As I was doing my prepping today, I went back and cleaned up my files, and I have been doing 5 years of Mercury retrograde. I have started my 6th year of doing Mercury retrograde cycles. Got a lot of these slides kind of fine-tuned, and if you follow these Mercury retrogrades, you go, okay, here we go again. So I'm just going to move over these faster. I'm not going to do all the details. If you're new to this Mercury retrograde webinar, you're going to have the PDFs to go back through and print out however you want to use them. Planetary retrogrades are the opportunity to break free from consensus conditionings and align with our own individual expression of that planet. With Mercury, it means learning to think for ourselves. Planetary retrogrades are always in a process of throwing something off. And the transiting planetary retrograde always relates back to the natal signature. So wherever natal Mercury is in your house, or in your chart, by sign, by house, by aspects, your natal Mercury is going to be triggered by any Mercury retrograde, regardless of whether Mercury retrograde makes an aspect to natal Mercury. And of course, if you're someone who was born during Mercury retrograde, you experience a temporary harmony because Mercury is traveling the direction it was when you were born. I have a nephew who has Mercury retrograde in Pisces natally, and he, over the years, talking to Aunt Kimmy, he's going, hey, I can't wait for Mercury retrograde because then I know my life is just going to smooth out for a month. And this is true not of just Mercury, but any planetary retrograde. Here's the astronomy for you. Mercury goes around the sun every 88 days. But because it's so close, it appears to take a year. And it's because it has those 3 to 4 retrograde cycles every year. And because Mercury is so close to the sun from the Earth's appearance, this is why your Mercury is either the sign before, the sign of, or the sign after your sun sign. Because Mercury never gets more than 29 degrees beyond the sun from our geocentric Earth perspective. Here's the visual. If you followed Mercury in the sky every night, it would appear to go and then go through the heavens and then reverse itself and then go forward again, making 1, 2, 3 passages. Pre-shadow, retrograde, post-shadow in those degrees we are talking about. 24 Cancer to 5 Leo. Mercury retrograde patterns. Mercury reverses through the elements. And so you can see on your screen here, 2019, Mercury is in water signs 6 months. And that usually spends a year in one element, then transitions from one element to the next year, and then an element, etc. But here's one for you. This is Mercury by element. As it goes through those 12 signs of the zodiac approximately in a year, look at this. Half of the year, water. If you feel that you're more emotionally frustrated than normal in 2019, this could be one of the reasons why. Because Mercury is spending so much time in Cancer, Scorpio, and Pisces. It's where its retrogrades are taking place. And of course, not to mention that North Node in Cancer and the eclipse is taking place in Cancer, Capricorn. So how well can you sometimes take a deep breath, count to 10 or 100, or if you snip, shout, argue with your loved ones, how well can you come back and say, sorry I barked at you, honey. I did that this morning with my sweetie pie. And I go, doesn't matter how many times I get frustrated and and launch out verbally, Mercury. What matters is I come back and say, sorry, apologize, recognize my behavior. That's mature Mercury. And Mercury retrograde, yeah, we can do that more than once a day. Now, I always put this up. Mercury rules 2 archetypes. Outer Mercury is its rulership of Gemini and the 3rd house because it's active polarity, energy moving out from the center. I'll let you refer to all of these words yourself through the PDFs as we review any of this. And of course, Mercury also has its inner side through its rulership of Virgo in the 6th house. And this is related to the passive polarity or energy moving back to the center. And so just by nature of these 2 archetypes Mercury rules, any of this that you see on these 2 slides comes up for review, release, throwing things off during Mercury retrograde through almost any sign. So Mercury retrograde, releasing excess thought, our mind's taking in as much as it can. It's hard to process. It's time to just let go of old mental patterns. It's time to turn inward and quiet our mind, again, learning to think for ourselves and trust our intuition first, logic and facts second. And this is because the ruler, Mercury's rulership of Gemini, polarity points to Sagittarius, Jupiter, right brain. Mercury's rulership of Virgo, polarity points to Pisces, Neptune, and whole brain. So every Mercury retrograde, that mutable quadrant is activated. And it's just like, how well can you be silent and listen? And yet, guess what happens with Mercury retrograde? It can stir up the communications. And so we may go back and forth between those time periods where I just got to go sit in a chair by myself and think, with time periods that we have to discuss something multiple times until both or multiple parties reach some effort of clarity. Now, Mercury's most intense the day before, the day of, the day after. It turns retrograde and direct. And yes, those are time periods to pay attention to driving if you have a vehicle. Don't drop your phone. Take care of all your electronic stuff. Mercury has co-rulership of all of that. And yes, it can go haywire during those time periods. And sometimes we just have to turn the computer off and come back to it the next day and nothing changed. We didn't do anything. We just gave ourselves a break from electronica. And it allows us to be able to quiet the mind, shift perspective. So in addition to throwing off the old patterns, it's a time period for learning to think differently, learning to speak differently, learning to practice new mantras and affirmations. Mercury retrograde is a great time for that. Mercury retrograde is a time to get an astrology reading too. You might, if you have to reschedule it more than once, I always say, well, let's trust the universe that when we have to have it, it's just going to work out. So one more time for you again. Here are the dates that Mercury is in Cancer and Leo. And as you can see, it's kind of balancing it out in regards to how many days in each sign through these 3 months. Here are the actual dates of pre-shadow, post, and Mercury retrograde, and that interior conjunction for you. And so, just briefly, Mercury retrograde in Leo is going to be revisiting inner versus outer love, or inner and outer love. And if we are insecure, we can get all caught up in the traumas to be the center of attention in order to feel loved. If we are secure, self-love, Leo, Cancer, then we recognize that that outer world is just a reflection of what's going on inwardly. And if we don't like what's out there, then we can process and go, why? What do I change about me that then changes my relationship with the world? It's an opportunity to objectify and heal any emotionally arrested wounds. The natural zodiac, Cancer is emotional self-reliance. We're responsible for our own love and happiness regardless. And if we do not have that nurturing in our early environment, we can have an emotional wound that gets arrested or stuck, and it gets projected forward into adulthood. And as we go through this Mercury retrograde in Leo back to Cancer, we can revisit any of this stuff. And from the perspective of an adult, we can go, how do I love myself better? How do I heal myself better? How do I acknowledge the inner child within me? And if you're a parent with children, you will want to be doing this with your children. How can you minimize your projections and attitudes with them and actually step back, quiet down, and see them as they are, unique souls in the world? So it's opportunities for self-love. And Mercury's going to point out where you perhaps are not doing it as fully as you can. Mercury retrograde in Leo is also going to be working through all of those creativity lessons. And one of the things that we can have happen with Leo is we want to be the director of the play rather than recognizing universal source. The big kahuna is the director. And so what is our role in our life, in the world? And can we align with it or realign with it in some way that will help us feel emotionally peaceful, grounded, and self-loved? And remember, even though the eclipses are going to be in Cancer, Capricorn, Mercury retrograde in Leo, Mars in Leo, all of this stuff can just, one day we're going along fine, and then all of a sudden something blows up in our world. How well can you handle it emotionally? And of course, creative self-actualization is our key phrase for Leo with evolutionary astrology. And part of that whole I want to be in charge and control is learning how to I will, my will, divine will. Similar to my Neptune and Pisces mantra, what would you have me know, Source? What would you have me do, Source? We all have unique creative roles to play. How are your roles in flux? How are they evolving? How are they changing? How is Mercury giving you repetitious messaging of what to do next with its retrograde cycle? Nature is abundant, and there's more than enough love and creativity to go around for all of us. We can also be reviewing karma around children, Leo, parenting the children, Leo. Leo is children. And so the stepchildren for the Pluto and Leo generation, of course, each successive generation got into that role with stepchildren in some way. It's the norm more than perhaps raising your biological children for some cultures. So what can we review around our own childhood history, around our children's history? How can we evolve being a parent to ourselves? Do we have any role reversals going on between adult children and aging parents? How do we address the karma with children? You look at the nodal axis in Cancer, Capricorn, and from the US at least, I think it's probably going on in many other places as well, the whole issue of immigration. And if we can't take care of the children, what does that say about us as a society? Aquarius Polarity. So all this can be up in the air during this Mercury retrograde on a collective level. And all of us may be addressing it some way on a personal level as well. When Mercury retrogrades back into Cancer, then it really is the time to focus on that emotional self-reliance that's getting all stirred up by the eclipses. And I get asked, well, Kim-Marie, what is that? It means we rely on ourselves to make ourselves happy emotionally. We are the only one who can make ourselves happy, and we are the one totally responsible for making ourselves happy, regardless of your world, regardless of your lifestyle, your circumstances, regardless of what happens to you. It means when you're thrown in upon yourself emotionally, it's for you to figure out how to love yourself better. And in evolutionary astrology, all of those emotions can be reduced down into two emotional cycles, withdrawal and animation. And the withdrawal cycle means that something is triggering us and it turns us inward. We want to crawl in our cave. Why is this happening? What's it mean? How do I heal it? How do I love myself better? How do I reach an emotional homeostasis again? How do I get that emotional self-reliance again? How do I love me better? And when we reach that emotional centeredness again, we flip into the animation cycle and we become emotionally active. We go out of our cave. We want to talk. We want to share. We want to socialize. We want to do everything with everybody until we're triggered again. These two cycles, withdrawal and animation, they're unpredictable. You can be fine one moment and triggered to the bejeebies the next moment, especially with the nodes in Cancer Capricorn and especially with eclipses in Cancer Capricorn. And what do we have? We have Venus getting ready to go through Cancer. We have Mars finishing up Cancer. I think it goes into Leo tomorrow. And so we've had and now we've got Sun in Cancer. So, you know, if you're not emotionally triggered, do you feel? Are you alive? Are you breathing? All of us, male and female, are having all kinds of emotions stirred up. And Mercury retrogrades lesson is to help us figure out what it all means. And then making an effort to change our thoughts. There is this cliche called happiness is a choice. So how well are you choosing to be happy regardless? And of course, with Mercury's retrograde back in Cancer, more of those family patterns are brought up to review one more time. Our family of origin, any families we are creating, it's about understanding any familial patterns and making the effort to change the pattern. And of course, the Cancer Capricorn planets and eclipses are bringing about all kinds of changes in our parenting roles and in our gender roles. So how well do you understand your parents? How well do you understand your children? Can you step back and observe who they actually are versus what we want to project? Can we evolve? Can we allow them to evolve? and just look at how all of the animus issues are exposed. You know, they talk about all the LBGT and pride parades that have been going on here this last week of June. And in the United States, it's basically the 50-year anniversary of the Stonewall Inn, if I'm got the word right, whereby 50 years ago, this bar in New York City, which was an underground gay bar, was I can't remember what the word is right now, where the police come in and storm everything, and it turned into a riot. And yet, isn't it interesting that that last week of June is Sun in Cancer? The Sun in the Moon sign, and Cancer Capricorn is anima animus. So Mercury retrograde in Cancer, it's balancing our inner male and female. In evolutionary astrology, the expansion of consciousness within the soul through lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, the more the soul expands in consciousness, the more it can hold and balance inner male and inner female, regardless of the gender they physically are walking through. It's no, coincidence that through this 15-year passage of Pluto in Capricorn, and now Saturn catching up to Pluto for 2.5 years, and we have all the animus issues. And for those of us who come from the perspective of reincarnation and realizing we go back and forth between the two genders, and it really is working to be androgynous and holding again the animus within the soul. We let go of judging all of the gender issues, and we allow the soul to work it out however they need to. If they want to be bi, great. If they want to be trans, great. If they want to switch genders, great. It's their own personal soul journey. And can we give all souls the freedom to learn that as they see fit to do in any given lifetime? Now, for those of you Pluto Libras and younger, Pluto Libra squaring Cancer, Capricorn, you guys are kind of like, oh, what is the big deal? Your generation came in going, well, we've been working on balancing this animus thing for quite a while. And some of you may be perfectly happy with one gender loving the opposite, but oh well, to each his own. So this isn't also a theme, Mercury retrograde in Cancer. This is one of my favorite quotes. It is a poster that I have had since college, and it hangs in one of my bedrooms. Different picture on my poster, but it's a Native American woman with a wolf, so I looked for something online. Nothing is as strong as true gentleness, and nothing is as gentle as true strength. This could be a Cancer Capricorn mantra if you're interested in it. Now, the Capricorn polarity for Mercury retrograde in Cancer is again taking responsibility for our life and what is the next step on my journey to mature, regardless of my chronological age. And through Saturn, balsamic Pluto in Capricorn, everyone can have outer securities changing. And outer security is only as good as inner security. When the outer world isn't working, Capricorn throws us inward, Cancer. Mercury retrograde in Cancer points towards Capricorn. Oh, can I look at how I've created this world, and if I don't like it, what do I change? How do I change myself inwardly to change it outwardly? How do I change my thought processes around everything we've been looking at so far? And as I do that maturation, then I learn to fulfill my role in society, including my career, whatever that naturally is for me, however small or large that may be. And so I have to take charge of my life, and I have to have the self-discipline to create what I want to create. And with Saturn, I may have to do it within the parameters of the circumstances of the given life, space-time. But on the broad soul level, I can make the inner changes with something I dislike so that I can create the future of this and every life differently. We may be limited in some of those circumstances. Not every soul in the United States is going to be president or a millionaire. But on a deep inner soul level, we do have the freedom to start energizing life differently. Mercury retrograde, free your mind. And of course, this Capricorn polarity will bring serious, practical conversations around all of these issues: our career, money, gender, equality, power versus powerlessness. All of this stuff will rise to the surface to be discussed with others. And so again, while we have some limitations in regards to the space-time Saturn Capricorn 10th manifestations, Mercury retrograde frees us up to think differently, and thoughts are things. Energy flows where attention goes. How do you change your thoughts? How do you change your words? How do you change where you focus your attention to then see it condense and manifest differently in the outer world? I have been waiting for this book. I knew that my heroine, Ellen Brown, Public Banking, had a new book coming out. I have my copy. I'm barely through the first few pages because I don't have a lot of time to read in the summertime. However, I just had to tell you about this book. Today, most of our money is created not by governments, but by banks when they make loans. This book takes the reader step by step through the sausage factory of modern money creation, explores improvements made possible by advances in digital technology, and proposes upgrades that could transform our outmoded 19th century system into one that is democratic, sustainable, and serves the needs of the 21st century. I don't care what country you live in. If you are interested in prosperity for yourself, if you are interested in prosperity for everyone, buy this book. I started with her first book, Web of Debt, then moved on to the Public Bank Solution. You can skip those two. She recaps everything in this book. And I haven't had a chance to read it. I had a lot of family over this last week. But she did come out with a new article on Facebook, and it's Libra cryptocurrency proposal. And just from her headline, I don't think she's a fan of cryptocurrencies. I'm not really a fan of cryptocurrency. It takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of main mega computers to run digital currencies. I am an advocate of public banking, which is taking the way we deal with our currencies now, our regular fiat or printed currencies, coin currencies that we've now made into digital currencies. I'm the fan of just taking it out of the control of the central banks and giving it to the banks of the people. I highly recommend you explore her if you have not come across her work yet. And as I said, Cancer, Capricorn. She is my heroine. The Capricorn polarity says that we have to learn how to parent ourselves. That's what happens when we heal any emotional wounds and immaturity. As we said before, taking care of all the children around the world. There are currently 70 million people, 10% of the world's population, is displaced by war and climate change today. Energize that community of we're all better together. And of course, Capricorn is judgments, and mainly they're consensus judgments, standards of right, wrong conduct, until death us do part if we marry, for instance, or you can't drink alcohol if you live in the Middle East. And so with this Mercury retrograde, even though it's in Cancer, the Capricorn polarity says we have to review all our judgments around whatever we consider to be a standard of right or wrong conduct. And the biggest thing is the hypocrisy of stating one thing and doing something different. The parent telling the child, do as I say, not as I do. I will let you think of your own Donald Trump examples if you would like to. Now, when Mercury is retrograde in Leo, which it's going to be this first part of the retrograde cycle, the Aquarius polarity is here again. How can we detach, step outside the immediacy of our situation, Leo, and develop objectivity? And this is what Mercury retrograde will be searching for. What's the larger picture and what's my role in it? And of course, even though eclipses are in Cancer, Capricorn, they're still going to bring this Mercury retrograde stuff to a head. Ask questions, inward, outward. And if you find yourself defensive, your security buttons are being pushed. And of course, with Aquarius, as I had said earlier, you pay attention to any repetitious messaging in regards to the future. What comes up once or twice, fantasy, wishful thinking, or way down the road, 10, 15 years. What comes up again and again and again during this Mercury retrograde is where you are supposed to be changing and moving forward today. Can you find the courage to act upon whatever your future-orientated messages are? Because Leo Aquarius is fixed modality. We can have the thoughts and yet do nothing about it because fixed air resists the change. Stays in our head. We don't act upon it. And if we don't act upon it, we can have those Aquarian shocks and traumas. And it's really just to wake us up. Mercury, think differently, process differently, speak differently, maybe even write differently. And so if you get any of those sudden upsets in your world, Mercury retrograde, why is this happening? What does it mean? What am I to learn? How am I to change? And of course, we can all go searching for those Aquarian friendships, those like-minded individuals, or get active in certain or new social groups, social causes. There could be some leaders emerging in the United States on the Democratic side through the first debates, through this Mercury retrograde while it's in Leo pointing to Aquarius, and then it's going to go back direct into Leo. There can be, a thinning of the herd with all the Democratic presidential candidates through this Mercury retrograde. And of course, on some of the broadest, highest levels, the Aquarius polarity is wanting fairness and equality for all concerned. That Aquarian age university in unity in diversity. I've used this quote before by W.F. Hightower. I put it in again. Everyone does better when everyone does better. Now, Mercury retrograde has a tendency to make a lot of aspects. This retrograde cycle is the exception to the rule. It only has a few aspects this retrograde cycle. However, as I said before, because we have a solar and lunar eclipse sandwiched within this retrograde cycle, it probably won't feel that way. It will still feel just as intense and active. In evolutionary astrology, we use the 360-degree wheel of the 8 phases and aspects. Every planet is in a phasal relationship to every other planet in your chart. There may or may not be a specific aspect. And so one of the things that we teach here at EAN in regards to chart interpretation, phase first, aspect second. So you can take months to go through your chart and explore every planet's phasal relationship to every other planet and gain a wealth of information on yourself just by looking at the phasal relationships between planets. And as a matter of fact, something I want to point out for you with Mercury retrograde, I'm going to show you the listing first. So Mercury is basically making conjunctions to Venus and Mars with this retrograde cycle, and then waning and waxing sesquisquadrates to Neptune and Jupiter. So instead of, let me show you this way. And again, this is generic. This is a generic zodiac starting with Aries through Pisces as the naturally exist in the 12 houses. Astrologers call this the natural zodiac. We know that Neptune's hanging out in Pisces, its own sign of rulership. Jupiter's hanging in its sign of rulership, Sag. They have last quarter squares to each other. I will tell students in astrology, where either you see this, you can look at this in the sky, the transits, forecasting, or you can look at it in a natal chart. When you see 2 planets in a square to each other, look across the chart and see if you see a 3rd planet. You're used to the 2 sextiles that have a planet across and it makes the yod, the long pointed triangle. Well, 2 planets in a square with the 3rd planet opposite has 2 sesquisquadrates going on, and it makes an it's got a triangle going on too. We have to create a term for this. I think I've said this before, and I don't remember what we were playing around with, talking back and forth with devotees of astrology, but we got to, I guess I better come up with a term for it. Sag, the walking cliche. So Mercury from Neptune, reversing through the zodiac as the planets do, is a waxing sesquisquadrate to Neptune, meaning it's going back and forth between first quarter and gibbous, or first quarter phase and gibbous phase. And starting with Jupiter, you go 2/3 of the way around the circle, and Mercury is making a waning sesquisquadrate to Jupiter, or going from, boy, my brain is tired. I want to get this right. Going from full phase to disseminating phase. And so we'll talk about that as we go forward with these slides, but I just wanted to point this out visually to you. So what's a sesquisquadrate, Kimberly? Again, you can go back and look at this. Right here is the waxing sesquisquadrate, first quarter to gibbous, and it's going from yang to yin, energy out to energy in. The disseminating phase, or waning sesquisquadrate, full phase to disseminating, again moving from energy out to energy in. And so there's as much tension in the half squares. Here's your 2 semi-squares right here. There's as much tension in the semi-squares and sesquisquadrates as there are with the squares, opposition, and conjunctions. These 8 points are all major tension shifts. And in evolutionary astrology, they all have value, they all have meaning, and being able to learn this really deepens your interpretation abilities with astrology. And so back to the Mercury retrograde, the highlight of any planetary retrograde is the conjunction or opposition to the sun. Oh, that was the July 21st event. That's the interior conjunction of Mercury to Sun at 28.5 degrees Cancer. That's the halfway point of the retrograde cycle. Here is the chart for the interior conjunction. And even though Mercury has retrograded, you know, here's again, I use 0 degree Aries. Here's Neptune, here's Jupiter. Mercury's retrograding past that point, but it is making this point 3 times with these planets. And so it was on the interior conjunction. That was the Venus-Pluto opposition that's going to be so tight right then. And of course, we see the moon in here too. And so to me, the interior conjunction of Mercury retrograde is that moon ruler of Cancer conjunct Neptune. This is lending itself to strong intuitive hits, especially clairsentient. Clairsentient is the emotional intuitive hits, just ahas coming along for you. And again, we're going to be just after the July 16th lunar eclipse. And so it's still going to be strong emotional energy with Venus in here with Mercury and Sun and North Node. And so you might want to mark this date, July 21st, on your calendar and use it as the searching and inviting your aha moments and intuitive hits for this Mercury retrograde cycle. Here is the US Gemini rising chart during that interior conjunction. And what I want to, well, I don't have that chart in here, but Mercury retrogrades all the way back to, what was it, 2357 Cancer. Look at the natal US at 24.5 Cancer. Mercury goes back to within a half a degree of its natal position in the US chart. Look at how these planets are marching closer and closer to this natal Pluto at 27.5. The Pluto-Pluto conjunctions are in 2022. But all of the Cancer Capricorn stuff that are triggered in the US chart, LGBTQ issues, the immigration issues, the healthcare for all, for me, the whole public banking where, you know, the interest goes back to the public coffers rather than a few stockholders. Our Federal Reserve, our central bank, is privately owned by the 12 member banks, which are owned by the banks that belong to each of the reserves. They're supposed to give the profits back to the people. We passed that, and then I think that sometime in the 1960s, but no one audits the Federal Reserve outside of it. So who knows who's cooking the books there. So all these Cancer Capricorn issues can be emphasized through the eclipses and this Mercury retrograde cycle. And of course, one of the things that astrologers look to with the Cancer, Sun in Cancer squares to Saturn in Libra, and also the Mars in Gemini square to Neptune in Virgo, the history of our country has been about inclusive versus exclusive, and waves of being inclusive and waves of being exclusive. And you can tell what's going on now. Will it change before the Pluto-Pluto conjunctions? Stay tuned. Let's see what Mercury the messenger and catalyst brings us over these next couple of months here. So here are the aspects that Mercury is making to Venus. These two always have aspects during a Mercury and a Venus retrograde. The mind and its values. And when Mercury's ahead of Venus, the mind's always racing ahead. and this is what I want to do, and this is what I want to do. And sometimes it goes retrograde and comes back to Venus, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, what's important? And so there's always a need for Mercury to be flexible with Venus around values. And because of all this Cancerian energy, everybody's going to be more emotionally triggered than usual. And we could get stuck in the old patterns. Leroy, our neighbors Jim and Judy have just driven up with their old Model T in the front yard and they're honking the horn. I'll just sit here. You can get up and go if you want. Sorry, everybody. We'll see if they knock on the door. All our garage doors are open. They know we're home. I don't know if you can hear him honking the horn. Sorry, everybody. My webinar desk is got a beautiful window out our front door or out our front view, and I see everything that comes up and moves through. So again, we can get real emotionally triggered and want to get stuck. There will be 2 Mercury-Venus conjunctions. More on the second one in September in Virgo in a few slides. Actually, this slide. Mercury will make 3 conjunctions to Mars. We've already had the first one. We're going to have the second one the day after Mercury turns retrograde, July 7th at 4.5 degrees Leo. That will create some intensity. That will create a bit of stubbornness. That will create a bit of my way or the highway. How well can we breathe and be flexible? But Mars is traveling with the inner planets this year. And what I want to point out to you is as we get through that last week of August and the first week of September, all 4 inner planets, I didn't look up to see where the moon is. I don't know if it's a new moon or not. All 4 of these inner planets have conjunctions between 4 and 11 degrees Virgo. So I have a tendency to think that whatever comes up for you with this Mercury retrograde cycle, it's probably not going to get resolved until the end of August, early September, when we have all of these planetary conjunctions. That will also be Mercury's exterior conjunction to the sun, finishing up and completing this Mercury synodic cycle with the sun, and then initiating the next one that's going to go forward. And so Mars has been moving ahead of the inner planets until these conjunctions, and Mars has had that tendency to just want to do, and sometimes we're not thinking. So Mercury's 3 conjunctions to Mars are going, ooh, maybe I better ponder this. Maybe I better reconsider. Maybe I better think about this before I jump in head first. Then, of course, to have all those conjunctions there in Virgo later this summer. How do I heal, self-love, and self-improve? So here's Mercury's waning sesquisquadrates to Jupiter, the 3 of them. And you see that the 3rd one comes on the same day that Jupiter goes direct and Uranus goes retrograde. So the last Mercury retrograde was in Pisces, conjunctions to Neptune, first quarter squares to Jupiter. This Mercury retrograde cycle will be just as active with Jupiter and Neptune. And so it's still going to lean towards that tendency. What's it all mean? What's the bigger picture here? What's the truth going on? And this is why I say that, there can be things that happen in the news, especially on political levels, that just really has some public opinions shifting. Because just like a Mercury retrograde affects each of us on real personal levels, and again, throwing off the old mental patterns and really quieting mind and learning to think differently. The same can happen for all of us together on collective levels, by country, by race, by religion, by various cultural, social political groups. Stay tuned. We'll see what happens there in the middle of August when the two, no, Jupiter is the largest planet in the solar system. The second largest one is Neptune or Uranus. Used to know that fact. Let's just say we got two powerhouses changing direction on the same day. And this Mercury aspect to Jupiter won't show up in your astrology calendars, but it's still there and it's still activating. And so I've been seeing this a bit recently, especially with the Jupiter squares to Neptune and the Saturn balsamic conjunctions to Pluto. Consensus consciousness has a tendency to kind of lag behind time-wise. Those of us who study astrology, if we have a big aspect coming up in our chart, we're worrying about it, we're pondering it, we're getting a reading, we're asking questions, we're being proactive and wanting to change with it so it doesn't, blow up in our face. Consensus consciousness doesn't do that. They don't have objectivity and understanding the bigger picture in general. And so they really can't look beyond how it affects them personally. And these Jupiter-Neptune squares they're searching for truth. Last quarter square, crises in consciousness or beliefs. What is the truth? But they also can create confusion in the consensus world. So what happens is consensus consciousness tends to need cataclysmic evolution in order to catch up. Cataclysmic evolution, physical Earth, think of volcanoes and earthquakes. Politically, will there be a mass shooting in the United States that tips the tide or the pendulum? Will there be, a huge hurricane like the ones we've had in the last few years? What will be the things that happen to wake people up? Mercury, the messenger and the trickster and the catalyst, can create some of this because it's in those tension-filled aspects to the Jupiter-Neptune squares. Mercury will aspect Jupiter, then Neptune 3 times, and each of those 3 times it'll do within the aspects to Jupiter and Neptune will come within days of each other. So here's the waxing sesquisquadrates to Neptune. And basically our egoic sense of self needs to be redefined and aligned with our deepest evolving beliefs. And if we are not doing that, we can distort into victimization. We can have a lack of willpower, Mercury retrograde in Leo. We can give up. We can have a lack of healthy boundaries. And if we get insecure, if we get, caught up in the ego, we can have willpower struggles. Our personal will try to override universal will. And we can do that for a while, but we can't do it in the long run. And so with this aspect here again, this is my, I think this is the Leo aspect in the evolutionary astrology mantras. I will, my will, divine will. I will, my will, divine will. Here's Mercury stationary direct. And so this is Mercury getting really, really close to an opposition to Pluto retrograde as the 3 other inner planets have moved into Leo, and just after a new moon. And so this is where we need to have a practical maturing of effort and applying that new mercurial knowledge to achieve our desires. Distortions, it's going to be power struggles over I'm right, you're wrong. My way or the highway. Which will it be for you? I had to fit this in here. This is my second favorite book right now that I've also just started reading, and I'm not getting through very fast. I don't know if I'll get these books read later this summer or winter. This is another person that I love, and I don't necessarily recommend you this book. It is a very academia book, very academic book. But you get the point. This is an economist who spent 30 years researching debt in various societies and came to recognize that the Bible is preoccupied with debt, not sin. Again and again, Jesus denounces the creditors. They were the sinners, not the debtors. That's the most important message that he had. And what Michael Hudson found in his research is that throughout history, the pharaohs and the kings would go through debt jubilees where they would wipe out the debt of the masses, the poorest of the poor, so that it would sustain their kingdoms. They wouldn't wipe out the masses for the upper class and the landowners, but this resetting of debt would just create a whole rebirthing of prosperity for all for a while. And so this gets applied in a more modern way by what Ellen Brown's Banking on the People book is describing. If you're interested in the details, you can read this. Otherwise, just get this message from Jupiter, last quarter square Neptune. So, finally, Mercury retrograde in Leo Cancer. How do I align my will with divine will? How do I deeply love myself? Where do I need to grow up and mature? Where do I need to learn objectivity? How do I fully participate in the world while relating to myself as well? One of my favorite teachings from Jeffrey Wolf Green is the quote, "Evolution takes place through the emotional body." So, evolution takes place through my emotional body. Honor that as you go through this next month and you look and observe and experience and live through these eclipses in this Mercury retrograde. The next Mercury retrograde will be October 30th when we look at a Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. Here's the dates of the next 3 Mercury retrogrades on the screen for you. For those of you who are aware of the changes in Leroy and my world, we've pretty much finished up our home kitchen renovation. Still don't have everything cleaned up. I go home for a week to pack my parents. In July, we moved my parents to the same town as me, in addition to my sister and her family. In the end of July through August, so I do not have any classes scheduled. However, here is a free class that I did for EA Zoom, and it is on our YouTube channel. Guess I could take the space out of YouTube, huh? Our YouTube channel is Evolutionary Astronet, and I'm pretty sure Leroy has posted this on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't, honey, will you quickly do that? But I think he's already done that. So another free webinar. Thank you. Another free webinar for more information on all of the planets in Capricorn. The Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto planetary nodes are in Cancer, Capricorn, and I go through all of that in that free webinar for you. And I like to finish up each of these Mercury retrogrades webinars with a listing of all of the aspects that I spoke about so that you have those in a chronological order for yourself in case you care to print this out or just observe it in that chronological order. All right. Thank you, everyone. Comments or questions with anything, Leroy?
No, once again, a lot of comprehensive information. We appreciate that, Kimberly. Very nice class tonight. And we bless all the Pluto and Libras born between 1970 and 1984. They're really going to probably have a little bit more poignant Mercury retrograde in Cancer than most, and yet it's affecting us all.
Well, and those born between 1932 to 1943, Pluto in late Cancer, early Leo, are going to have the Mercury retrograde conjunctions to their natal Plutos 3 times. So those souls will be a little activated as well. And my mother is one of those, and here she is moving across the state from where she has lived for 80 years of her life. Huge change for my mom. There's a little example for you. Well, thank you, everyone. I hope that you find this information useful in our Pay It Forward free Mercury retrograde webinars. And I wish you all emotional peace through the eclipse cycle and Mercury retrograde. And may you fulfill creativity to your heart's desire. Thank you, everyone.